Today we're going to look at distributed property and solving equations. First of all, let's talk about what the distributed property means. What does it even mean to distribute? It means to deal out to a person or group or etc. So look here, if you're at the teacher is going to hand out or distribute papers, she's going to make sure that there is a paper given to each person. So when you distribute something out, you're giving it to each person. A lot of places like Walmart and Target and those big places, they have what they call distribution centers. They're big warehouses with all their supplies in them and all of their products in them. So when the Walmart distribution center will send out their products to all these different Walmarts so they can be on the shelf to sell. So it's about handing out things or dealing out things to each person or group. So in math, what does it mean? So what about algebra? The distributed property allows you to take a factor that has to do with multiplication and distribute it to each member of a group, and that group usually in parentheses, that group of things that are being either added or subtracted. So we are going to distribute a factor. So we're going to use multiplication to distribute the factor to each member of a group. That group will be in parentheses, and usually that group is either added or subtracted. Let me show you an example. So here is a 7 in front of a set of parentheses 5x minus 2. The distributed property says that I am going to distribute the factor, and since it's a factor, that means multiplication, to each part inside the parenthesis. So this written out would be 7 times 5x minus 7 times 2. So notice I've distributed as a factor multiplication the 7 to the 5x and also to the 2. So 7 times 5x is 35x, and 7, negative 7, that's a minus 7, subtract 7, a negative 7, times 2 leaves it a minus 14. And now I have distributed the 7 to each part of the parenthesis. Here's another example. This time we're distributing the factor 4. So it's 4 times the 2x plus 4 times the 3. Now I am okay to do, I can distribute and say 4 times 2 is 8 in my head, but I'm writing it out to show you where I distributed it. But 4 times 2x is 8x, and 4 times 3 is 12. So again, I have distributed the factor 4 to what's in the group, 2x plus 3. How about in solving an equation? In the previous lesson, we'd put a line down here. We said the x is mixed up in there, so we're going to divide both sides by 2 to free up the x, and that is 6, and add 4, so x is 10. Well, those were for two-step equations. You could divide, and you could add or subtract, and you're done. There's a little more to this new lesson. There's more steps. And also, there's going to be times when you have to distribute. You can't just divide both sides by 2. Now, in this lesson, we could have divided both sides by 2 in this problem here, but we're not going to do it that way. We're going to actually use the distributed property because there's going to be times when there's more than one parenthesis in a problem and more than one time to distribute, and we will not be able to do it like we did here in the previous lesson. We can't use that all the time. So we want a method in math that we can use every single time. And so this is what you can do no matter what or how many parentheses you have in it. You can distribute the 2 to the 3x and the 4. So that's going to be 2 times the 3x minus 2 times the 4. And that will still equal the 12. All we're doing is distributing. So that's going to be 6x minus the 8 equal to the 12. From there, we're going to do what we've always done, and that is we're going to take the term with the x, isolate it by adding the 8, And then we're going to get x completely alone by dividing by 6. That's not changed. That's just like our two-step equation. So once we distribute this number in this lesson, once we distribute the number, then we're going to be able to use what we've learned in previous lessons to solve the equation. Well, this time we're actually going to end up with a fraction or a decimal. So x is going to equal, I can reduce 20 over 6 to 10/3. I also can write that other ways, like 3.3 repeating or 3 1/3. And then if I wanted to check it, I could plug it back in and check my answer. And so if I did that, it will work out to 12. But this time I got a fraction on that one. So here are the steps that you have in your notes. The first thing we're going to do is remove the parentheses using the distributive property. And what the distributive property says is that it says that we're going to take the factor and distribute it to what's in the group of parentheses. So this is going to be 7 times 3x minus 7 times 2 equals 28. So that's 21x minus 14 equals 28. Now this step here is not required. I can say 7 times 3 is 21, so that's 21x. And 7 times 2 is 14, and it's one positive, one negative, so it's still minus 14 is 28. Now I'm going to move the constant to the other side, or I'm going to, what I've been saying before, isolate the x term. So when we have 21x is where the x is, I need to move the 14 to the other side. And that is 21x, and that is 42. And I can divide both sides by 21, and my x value is 2. Now remember, at any point, you can check your work. 7, 3x, that's 3 times 2, because x was 2, minus 2 has to be 28. So I do what's in parentheses first. 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 minus 2 is 4, and 7 times 4 is 28. So it is correct. But remember, at any point, you can plug the number back in for the variable and do that. So then there's multiply or divide to solve is what we did last. But moving that constant isolates the x term. So first we're going to distribute. And so we're going to distribute the 5. I'm distributing it as a factor multiplication. So we have 5 times 2x is 10x, and 5 times 7 is 35. So once we've done that, we've distributed it. Remember, we have their two sides. This term has the x in it, so I have to isolate it by moving the 35 to the other side. That gives me 10x equals 50. Then I need to get x completely by itself. The 10 needs to be divided, because the opposite of multiplication is division. So x is 5. And I could check that. But as these problems get longer, I'm not going to go back and check them every single time. But know that you can. So you would just plug the 5 in there and make sure that that equals 15. That's 10 minus 7. That's 3 times the 5. 5 times 3 is 15. So yeah, it checks out. At any time you can plug it in and check it. So if you're taking a test, then you can make sure you can plug them in and check it out to see which answer is the right one if you have multiple choice, or you can check your own work and do really well on a quiz or test. Again, we're going to distribute the factor of 4 to both pieces of the parenthesis. All right. And so when we do that, we get 12x here, 32, and a 16. 2 parts to our equation. This term has the x in it. Isolate that. 12x is equal to 48. Divide both sides by 12, and your x is equal to 4. So the value of x is 4. We'll make that equation true. We can plug it back in. And check it out. 3 times 4 is 12. That's 4 times 12 minus 8 is also 4. 4 times 4 is 16. It checks out. Again, we're going to use the factor of -2. But what we're going to see here is it's a subtract, and then it's a -2 that's being multiplied by the 3. So, or you can see this as -2 times -3 and change that to adding a negative. But what you need to realize in this problem is there's a negative on the 2 and there's a minus there. So 2 negatives make a positive. So this is going to be -10x plus 6, not minus. It's a very common mistake that kids make. So then I'm going to isolate the term with the x. I'm going to divide by -10. So x turns out to be 1. I'm not going to check that one, but you could go back and do the checking process if you wish. And finally, we're going to distribute the -9. So -9 times 2x plus a -9 times 3. And the 3 is positive because of the plus in front of it, equals 27. That's going to give me -18x. A negative times a positive is a negative, or a minus 27. We're going to isolate the term with the x in it. That's going to give me -18x equals 54. And divide by -18. And x is equal to -3. As you can see, these problems do get longer. There's more steps. You need to be careful each step. As you mess up along the way, you'll get an incorrect answer, but it may not mean that you're, terribly off by that much because you just made a solid mistake. Like maybe you made the mistake of multiplying these two together and getting a positive 27 or something. If that happened, it would throw your whole problem off to a different answer, and that's why plugging it back in to check yourself is very helpful, but not required, but very helpful. So this is -9, that's -6 plus 3. -9 times -3 is 27, so it worked out. I hope this lesson has helped you learn more on how to distribute and how to do equations using distribution.